Spring and summer 2019, prepare yourselves for an onslaught of stories about the many Boston, Mass luminaries, innovators, change agents, trailblazers, pioneers, and legends whose successes we've celebrated but haven't received their due like the ones in other cities have. This is the Boston Legends Podcast, hosted by me, Dart Adams, on Dawgs. Hey, what up? This is Dart Adams, and this is the first installment of the Boston Legends Podcast. For those of you that have no idea, this has been a long time coming. I've grown up in Boston my entire life, and I've been a fan of Boston sports. I've heard different legends about Boston. My city, I grew up in the South End, Lower Roxbury area, which is a huge stretch of Boston that is home to some of the most exquisite Black history that America has to offer. And I never heard any of the stories that my elders told me outside of the city. So that extends to why this podcast exists. This is the Boston Legends Podcast again. If you know anything about sports in America, or especially basketball, and how it became the predominant game of the city, you know that New York has taken the crown as the home or the mecca of basketball. A lot of you don't know that Boston weighs heavy in that equation. Although people look at New Jersey and Philadelphia and all the other cities in the Northeast going up and down, people always forget about Boston. And this podcast exists to change that. Whether you're looking at Slam Magazine, when they have the street ball legends, or they tell stories about the greats, I never seen Boston properly represented. When I see so many people who came from the Boston area or Massachusetts, and they work at places like ESPN or Fox Sports, when they have opportunities to tell stories about Boston and Mass athletics, they never do, and they always overlook the inner city, which is where so many stories are, and it's a shame. So here we are with two legends on my left, on my right. So on my right, I have
Abner, Logan.
Okay, and on my left,
Malcolm Wynn. I just fiberglass to being called a legend.
Okay, so I know, Abner, you have a long history of not only playing but being a coach in both the Boston Shootout and the Boston City League.
Yeah.
So the Boston City League was split into North and South.
North and South at one point. I started my coaching career as an assistant and teaching career at Rosendale High School, which is not in existence anymore. It turned into West Roxbury. And so part of it was actually getting some experience under my belt, working for different people, and kind of learning the game on that level and whatever. So it was a good experience for me coming from Boston College to the Boston public schools, and just, fortunate enough to be under some people that really knew what they were doing.
Mm-hmm. And what was your induction?
So my induction to Boston basketball actually was because of the man to your right. I coached at Brookmont High School from 1984 to 1998. But during that time period, I met Coach Logan and Hayden and Barn Urban. They invited me to be part of the coaching staff for the Boston Shootout. And so during that time, I had a chance, we had the opportunity to work with some of the best players to ever come out of the city of Boston. And just being around the city, I met a lot of those Boston legends because they were former participants, of the Boston Shootout, or there was the stories of guys that should have made the shootout. And you talk about, growing up in the South End. Well, the best player to ever come out of the South End was DeJuan Chandler.
Yeah.
They actually had a DeJuan Chandler Day
Chain the man
for a 15-year-old. So things like that. So I'm very, very, very fortunate, to be here today and humbled, by this opportunity.
All right. And so did you always live in Boston, or did you move here and play as a youngster?
No, what happened, when I attended Boston College, I was originally from Connecticut, and I came up, I tell the story, I came up on a track scholarship, and basically to run track at Boston College. And I looked at the team working out one time, the basketball team, and then I asked the coach, I said, you think I could play? He said, I don't have a scholarship or anything, because everybody in Connecticut played ball. So he said, yeah, we'll take a look at you. So that's how everything began for me. Chuck Daly was the coach at the time at Boston College. Frank Powers, who wrote a book. Bob Cousy had just left.
Yeah, he was the coach.
And so the Powers brothers and the Powers cousins, this whole family of them, that basically really knew basketball inside and out. I know I played on the street a lot and whatever, and actually, from Connecticut, from Hartford to New York was a short distance, and sometimes we just go around looking for games. We'd go down to New Haven, down to, even like the Village and whatever, and just to play for the competition. And so a lot of the people they talked about, I actually got a chance to play with. So when I came to Boston, I looked at Boston, whatever, and I just looked around and I heard stories about individuals and whatever, but they weren't as big as the New York stories, because everybody in New York is a living legend and whatever. So I just, I heard about that, but I played against the competition here in Boston. I said, something, there's something wrong with this picture, because one thing I realized growing up and being a fan of New England basketball is that I saw this guy play, and I watched him on television so many times, and I'm like saying, I can't believe he scored 40 points. I'm watching a game. I can't believe he was Jimmy Walker.
Yeah.
So Jimmy Walker was my first kind of induction to what the potential of Boston basketball was. Then before I left Connecticut.